The desperate call, the emergency beacon, pierced through the usual calm of Nexus Prime's communication center like a scream in the void. Ambassador Kethara's translucent blue skin rippled with distress as she rushed through the station's flowing corridors, her gill slits fluttering rapidly in the recycled atmosphere. The Ceridian had never moved so urgently in her long diplomatic career. The Grand Assembly Chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 14 different species gathered in their specialized environmental pods. The Thu-Vaxi floated in their methane-filled chambers, their feathery appendages twitching with anxiety. The massive Corlin delegates stood like living mountains of crystallized minerals, their deep voices rumbling through the chamber's acoustic systems. Even the ethereal Zephyrians had condensed their gaseous forms into visible humanoid shapes, a sign of extreme concern. Council Chairman Vorfik, whose ancient crystalline body had witnessed over 2 millennia of galactic peace, activated the central holographic display with a gesture of his faceted hand. Honored delegates, we face an unprecedented crisis. Ambassador Kethara of the Ceridian Collective has requested emergency assembly protocols. Kethara approached the center platform, her voice carrying the melodic quality typical of her aquatic species, but strained with emotion. Esteemed Council, my people are dying. Our outer colonies have gone silent, one by one. 3 days ago, we lost contact with New Tidal, our largest settlement. Yesterday, the research station at Coral Deep transmitted their final message before her voice broke. The hologram shifted to show a water world of stunning beauty, with vast coral cities beneath crystal-clear oceans and floating platforms that gleamed like pearls in the sunlight. But sections of the planet appeared wrong, covered in what looked like a gray, metallic fog that seemed to consume everything it touched. What manner of weapon creates such devastation? Asked Delegate Dizes of the Corlin, his rocky features expressing confusion. We have protocols for energy, weapons, plasma bombardment, even antimatter devices. This appears to be something else entirely. Kethara activated another display, showing footage from their last functioning surveillance satellite. The images were disturbing. Clouds of tiny metallic objects, each no larger than a grain of sand, moved across the landscape like living storms. Whatever they touched simply disappeared, breaking down at the molecular level and being absorbed into the swarm. We call them devourers, Kethara said, her voice barely above a whisper. They appeared from deep space without warning. No ship, no mothership, just these clouds of microscopic machines. They consume everything organic and inorganic matter, water, air, the very minerals of our world. And with each consumption, they grow larger and more numerous. Counselor Nexon of the Thu-Vaxi, speaking through their translation device, asked, "Have you attempted communication protocols? Perhaps they are merely misguided, seeking resources for their own survival." We tried. Everything, Kethara replied, her bioluminescent patches flickering with desperation. Universal translation matrices, mathematical sequences, even basic pictographs. They do not respond. They do not negotiate. They do not pause. They simply consume. Our defense fleets fired everything we had at them. Energy weapons pass right through the swarms. Projectile weapons are absorbed and converted into more units. Even our most powerful plasma cannons only temporarily disperse them before they reform. The chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. The concept of something that could not be reasoned with, negotiated with, or deterred was alien to most of the species present. The Galactic Council had been built on the principle that all intelligent life could find common ground through communication. And understanding Chairman Vorthic's crystalline form shifted as he processed this information. What is the current status of your homeworld? The outer colonies are gone. Completely. Not even debris remains. The Devourers have reached our second-tier worlds. At their current rate of expansion, They will reach Ceridia Prime within 72 hours. We estimate that our entire civilization has perhaps 1 week before total extinction. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. The Ceridians were one of the oldest council members. Their peaceful nature and vast knowledge of oceanic science is making them invaluable to galactic civilization. Surely our combined fleets can mount a defense, suggested Elder Vorth of the Zephyrians, his gaseous form swirling with determination. Kethara's response crushed that hope. Honorable Elder, 3 other species have already attempted joint military action. The hegemony of Kos sent their entire battle fleet. The Devourers consumed the ships and used the materials to create larger, more sophisticated units. The Altarian Defense Force tried a coordinated assault with energy weapons. The swarms adapted within minutes, becoming immune to their frequencies. Each military action only makes them stronger. The implications hung heavy in the recycled air. If traditional military might was not only useless, but actively beneficial to the enemy, what options remained? It was Delegate Thizes who spoke the thought that many had been avoiding. There is one military force we have not discussed, one that the Council has deliberately kept at arm's length due to their unconventional methods. Chairman Vorthix. Crystalline surface dimmed. The humans. The mention of Earth species sent a ripple of unease through the assembly. Humans were the newest additions to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. But their reputation preceded them. They came from what most species classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet so hostile that survival required constant adaptation and conflict. The humans are violent, protested Counselor Nexon. Their entire culture is built around warfare and competition. They turn to violence as a first resort, not a last one. Perhaps, Kethara said quietly, that is exactly what we need. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's main entrance hissed open. A tall figure in a dark blue uniform strode in, flanked by 2 similarly dressed companions. The humans had arrived unannounced, as was their habit. Admiral Sarah Chun was a compact woman with short black hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the chamber in seconds. Her uniform bore insignia that most species had learned to recognize the symbols of Earth's United Defense Forces. Behind her walked Captain Marcus Rivera, a larger man whose bearing suggested he was accustomed to combat, and Dr. Alex Park, a younger human whose hands never stopped moving as he operated a portable scanning device. Council Chairman Vorthik. Admiral Chun said, her voice carrying the confidence that humans seem to possess naturally. We received Ambassador Kethara's distress call. Earth stands ready to assist. The chamber erupted in surprised chatter. Humans responding to emergency calls before being officially asked was typical behavior, but it still unsettled many species. Chairman Vorthik managed to maintain his diplomatic composure. Admiral Chun, while we appreciate Earth's eagerness to help, the Council has not yet voted on requesting human intervention. With respect, Chairman, Admiral Chun replied, people are dying while you debate. We've been monitoring the situation for the past 18 hours. Dr. Park has some interesting observations about these devourers. Dr. Park stepped forward, still, scanning the holographic displays. The nanomachine swarms show characteristics we've seen before. Not exactly, but similar principles. They're using von Neumann replication protocols, but with adaptive programming that learns from each encounter. And this helps us how? Asked Delegate Thizes. Captain Rivera spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a slight accent. Because humans have fought self-replicating enemies before. Not in space, but on Earth. Viral outbreaks, invasive species, even our own runaway AI experiments. We've learned that sometimes you can't fight fire with fire. Sometimes you need to fight fire with something completely unexpected. Cathara looked at the humans with something approaching hope. "You believe you can stop them?" Admiral Chun's expression was grim, but determined. "We don't know yet, but we're willing to try. However, I need you to understand something important about human military doctrine. We don't fight to minimize casualties or look civilized. We fight to win, completely and permanently. Are you prepared for that level of response?" The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans were offering help, but they were also warning that their methods would be unlike anything the peaceful species had ever witnessed. Cathara thought of her homeworld, of the billions of Ceridians who would die if nothing was done. She thought of her own family, still on Ceridia Prime, trusting that their government would find a solution. "Admiral," she said firmly, "my people are facing extinction. I am prepared for anything that might save them." Admiral Chun nodded once, sharply. "Then we're going to need a ship, a big one. And we're going to need you to trust us, even when what we do seems impossible or insane." Chairman Vorthic's crystalline form flickered as he processed the decision before him. On one hand, allowing humans to respond with their full military capability could set a dangerous precedent. On the other hand, the alternative was watching an entire civilization die while they debated proper procedures. "The Council will provide whatever resources you require," he said finally. "But Admiral, I must ask what makes you believe you can succeed where others have failed?" Admiral Chun smiled, but it wasn't a comforting expression. "Because, Chairman, everyone else has been fighting these things like they're a traditional enemy. They're not. They're a virus, a plague, a natural disaster. And humans have survived on a planet that's been trying to kill us for millions of years. We've learned that sometimes the best way to beat nature is to use it against itself." Dr. Park was already pulling up tactical displays on his portable unit. "We'll need detailed scans of the affected areas, biological samples from any surviving ecosystems, and a complete analysis of every military engagement so far. Captain Rivera will coordinate ground operations while Admiral Chun handles fleet deployment." "And what's your plan?" asked Cathara. Captain Rivera's smile was wolf-like. "Ambassador, humans have a saying, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. Hard enough. These devourers think they understand warfare because they've adapted to every logical military response. But humans aren't always logical. We're going to teach them that chaos can be just as deadly as order." As the human team began coordinating with Council resources, Cathara felt a mixture of hope and terror. She had called for help and received it, but she was beginning to understand that human assistance came with its own risks. The humans were preparing for war in a way that no other species would consider. And somehow, that gave her more hope than any traditional military response ever could. Deathworld Solutions. Human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Ceridia system, like a pack of predators sensing wounded prey. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the UDS Relentless, watching the tactical display with the cold focus that had made her one of Earth's most decorated commanders. What she saw made even her experienced crew fall silent. Ceridia Prime hung in space like a partially consumed jewel. The beautiful blue-green world that had housed billions of aquatic beings was now a patchwork of healthy ocean and spreading gray zones where the devourers had begun their work. From orbit, the infected areas looked like metallic cancer eating away at the planet's surface. "Sensor report," Admiral Chun commanded. Lieutenant Ilana Vasquez, the fleet's combat engineer, worked frantically at her station. "Admiral, I'm reading. Massive swarm activity across 47% of the planetary surface. The nanomachine concentration is unlike anything in our databases. Each individual unit is microscopic, but collectively we're looking at a biomass equivalent to several small moons. Captain Rivera studied the tactical display from his position at the Marine Command Station. How long until total planetary consumption? Dr. Park, who had barely slept during the 3-day journey from Nexus Prime, looked up from his research console. At current expansion rates, maybe 18 hours. But Admiral, I think I've found something important. Admiral Chun turned to face the young scientist. During the journey, Dr. Park had been analyzing every piece of data the Council had provided about the Devourers, comparing it to Earth's own experiences with similar threats. These nanomachines are incredibly sophisticated, Dr. Park explained, bringing up a holographic model. But they're also predictable. They follow optimal efficiency patterns in everything they do. They always take the shortest path, always consume the highest energy materials first, and always replicate using the most resource-efficient methods. And that helps us how? Rivera asked. Dr. Park smiled the same unsettling smile that humans wore when they were about to do something other species would consider insane. Because humans don't always do the efficient thing. We're wasteful, chaotic, and frequently make decisions that seem counterproductive. The Devourer's programming can't predict behavior that doesn't follow logical optimization patterns. Admiral Chun was beginning to see the shape of their strategy. You're saying we can exploit their predictability. Exactly. But more than that, I think we can turn their own efficiency against them. These things are basically a hyper-advanced version of Earth's gray goo scenario. But we've been preparing for that possibility for decades. Sergeant Jake Thompson, the fleet's heavy weapons specialist, looked up from checking his equipment manifest. Doc, all this theory is great, but those things down there are eating a planet. What's the actual plan? Admiral Chun activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Chun. We're going to implement Protocol Omega-7. I repeat, Protocol Omega-7 is now in effect. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Protocol Omega-7 was one of Earth's most extreme contingency plans developed for scenarios where conventional warfare had completely failed. It was never supposed to be used against an alien threat. Admiral, Lieutenant Vasquez said carefully, Omega-7 was designed for use on Earth. Against Earth-adapted threats, we're dealing with alien technology in an alien environment. Which is exactly why it might work, Dr. Park interjected. The Devourers have adapted to fight against rational, efficient military responses from peaceful species. They've never encountered human warfare doctrine. Captain Rivera was already suiting up in his combat armor. Admiral, my teams are ready for planetary insertion, but I need to know what we're walking into down there. The main view screen shifted to show surface imagery from Ceridia Prime. The once beautiful coral cities now looked like metallic graveyards, their organic curves replaced by the geometric efficiency of the Devourer swarms. But what was most disturbing was the movement. The entire infected surface writhed like a living thing as trillions of nanomachines worked to convert matter into more of themselves. Jesus, Sergeant Thompson muttered. It's like the planet has a skin condition. Ambassador Cathara, who had insisted on joining the human fleet despite the obvious dangers, watched the display with barely controlled grief. My people built those cities over centuries. Now they're just raw material for those things. Admiral Chun placed a reassuring hand on the Ceridian's shoulder. Ambassador, we're going to make those machines regret ever coming to your system. But I need you to understand something. What we're about to do is going to look like we're making the situation worse before it gets better. I don't understand. Dr. Park brought up another display, this one showing Earth's biosphere. Ambassador, humans evolved on a planet that was constantly trying to kill us. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plague outbreaks, you name it. We learned that sometimes the only way to stop a disaster is to create a bigger, more controlled disaster. Before Cathara could ask what that meant, Alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Lieutenant Vasquez's voice cut through the noise. "Admiral, we have incoming. Devourer swarms are launching from the planet's surface. Estimated arrival time, 4 minutes." Through the view screen, they could see them coming. Clouds of metallic particles rising from the planet like smoke, but moving with purpose and intelligence. As they climbed toward the human fleet, the individual, swarms began merging into larger formations. "All ships, defensive positions," Admiral Chun commanded. "Remember, conventional weapons are useless against these things. Stick to the plan." Captain Rivera sealed his helmet and headed for the drop pod bay. "Admiral, permission to begin ground operations." "Granted, and Captain, good hunting." The Devourer swarms reached the human fleet and immediately began their standard attack pattern, trying to envelop the ships and break them down at the molecular level. But the humans had prepared for this. Instead of firing energy weapons or projectiles, the human ships began releasing clouds of their own. But these weren't weapons in any traditional sense. They were biological agents, carefully designed organisms that had been adapted from Earth's most aggressive life forms. "What are you doing?" Cathara asked in horror as she watched the human ships seemingly poison the space around themselves. Dr. Park monitored the interaction between the two swarm types. "We're introducing chaos into their system. Those organisms we just released are based on Earth bacteria that specialize in breaking down metal and consuming silicon. But we've modified them to reproduce unpredictably and mutate rapidly." The effect was almost immediate. Where the biological agents made contact with the devourer swarms, the nanomachines began malfunctioning. Their perfect efficiency was disrupted by organisms that didn't follow logical patterns, that wasted energy, that reproduced in ways that made no mathematical sense. "The devourers are trying to adapt," Lieutenant Vasquez reported, "but they can't establish a stable counterpattern. The biological agents keep changing faster than their learning algorithms can process." Meanwhile, Captain Rivera and his Marine teams were launching from the fleet in heavily armored drop pods. But these weren't headed for the planet's surface. Instead, they were targeting specific points in the upper atmosphere. "Rivera to Admiral," came the captain's voice over the communication system. "Beginning atmospheric seeding operations." What the Marines were doing would have been considered an ecological war crime on most civilized worlds. They were releasing modified Earth organisms into Ceridia, Prime's atmosphere viruses designed to attack silicon-based structures, bacteria that consumed specific metal alloys, and fungal spores that reproduced by breaking down electronic components. "You're poisoning the entire biosphere," Cathara whispered. "No," Dr. Park replied, monitoring the planet-wide effects. "We're introducing controlled chaos. Those organisms are designed to target the specific materials the devourers use for replication. They'll die out naturally once their food source is eliminated." But the most traumatic part of the human plan was yet to come. Sergeant Thompson, working from one of the orbital platforms, activated a device that the humans had been very secretive about during the journey. "Thompson to Admiral, the Prometheus device is ready for deployment." Admiral Chun took a deep breath. The Prometheus device was humanity's most extreme environmental weapon, designed for scenarios where an entire ecosystem needed to be reset. It had never been used outside of carefully controlled test environments. "Ambassador," Admiral Chun said to Cathara, "I need you to trust us for the next 60 seconds. What you're about to see is going to look like we're destroying everything, but it's the only way to save your world." The Prometheus device activated, sending a pulse of energy through Ceridia Prime's atmosphere. But this wasn't a destructive pulse. Instead, it was designed to trigger massive electrical storms across the planet's surface. Within seconds, the entire world was covered in lightning. The devourers, being sophisticated electronic devices, were immediately disrupted by the electromagnetic chaos. But more importantly, the electrical activity provided energy for the biological agents the humans had introduced, causing them to reproduce and spread at an exponential rate. Status report. Admiral Chun demanded. Dr. Park was staring at his readings in amazement. Admiral, it's working. The devourer swarms are breaking down faster than they can repair themselves. The biological agents are consuming their raw materials, and the electrical storms are preventing them from coordinating their adaptation responses. On the planet's surface, the gray zones of devourer infestation began to change. The metallic uniformity gave way to patches of chaotic biological activity. Earth organisms, modified to survive in almost any environment, began to reclaim territory from the nanomachines. But the most beautiful sight was what happened next. As the devourers were eliminated, the modified organisms began to die off as designed, having consumed their specific food sources. What remained was raw biological material that Ceridia's native ecosystem could absorb and use for recovery. Within 6 hours, the planet-wide infestation was gone. The devourers, for all their sophistication and adaptability, had been completely eliminated by something they had never encountered before: biological warfare combined with controlled environmental chaos. Ambassador Cathara stared at the readings in disbelief. It's over? Just like that? Captain Rivera, back aboard the ship after confirming the surface was clear, pulled off his helmet and grinned. Ambassador, humans have been dealing with things that want to consume everything for millions of years. Sometimes the best way to fight a plague is with another plague. Admiral Chun was already preparing departure orders. The cleanup organisms will finish processing the remaining nanomachine debris within 72 hours. Your world will be habitable again, though it'll take time for the ecosystems to fully recover. But how? Cathara asked. Every other military force that faced the devourers was consumed, made them stronger. How did you succeed where others failed? Dr. Park smiled as he packed up his equipment. Because, Ambassador, everyone else tried to fight the devourers like they were a military enemy. But they weren't soldiers. They were a natural disaster. And humans are very good at surviving natural disasters. We don't fight fair, Sergeant Thompson added cheerfully. We fight to win. As the human fleet prepared to depart, leaving behind monitoring stations and ecological recovery teams, Ambassador Cathara realized she had learned something important about their new allies. Humans didn't just fight with weapons and tactics. They fought with chaos itself, turning unpredictability into a weapon that could defeat even the most sophisticated enemy. The Galactic Council would debate the implications of human warfare methods for years to come. But the Ceridians would never forget that when facing extinction, the Deathworld species had answered their call with solutions that no civilized race would have ever considered. And perhaps most importantly, those solutions had worked. Asterisk.